In Venezuela's capital, where more than 3 million people live, water has become a luxury. According to the UN, over 60% of the city's households lack a regular water supply. The pipes are corroded, and pumping stations often fail due to chronic power outages. In some districts, tap water flows only once a week, for just a few hours. The supply is managed by the state company Hydrocapital, but due to corruption and lack of investment, its system has effectively collapsed. The pressure in the network is so low that water never reaches high-rise buildings. Residents install plastic tanks on rooftops to collect rainwater or buy water from private vendors. 1,000 liters cost about $10 to $15, which is nearly unaffordable for families earning an average monthly salary of $30 to $40. Alongside this, a shadow market has emerged. Hundreds of trucks transport water daily, illegally taken from reservoirs or rivers. In some Caracas neighborhoods, water mafias have appeared, controlling distribution and setting their own prices. In 2024, city authorities admitted that more than 2 million residents depend on such illegal suppliers. Schools are closing due to unsanitary conditions, and hospitals are limiting patient intake. The WHO reports a 40% increase in intestinal infections over the past 5 years. In a country that holds some of the world's largest oil reserves, citizens bathe with bottled water, or not at all. Who is responsible when an energy-exporting state cannot provide its own people with the most basic necessity? Water. After the hyperinflation of 2018 to 2021, Venezuela's national currency, the bolivar, effectively lost its meaning. According to official data from the central bank, prices rose by more than 53 million% over 3 years. Shops stopped accepting cash. Banknotes were worth less than the paper they were printed on. In response, villages in the country's southeast, near the gold mining regions of Bolivar and Amazonas, turned to bartering with gold. There, gold flakes extracted from rivers or illegal mines are weighed with ordinary spoons. According to Reuters, 0.25 grams of gold is enough to buy a kilogram of rice or a loaf of bread. Bakeries, pharmacies, and even barbershops accept fine gold dust instead of money. The gold is refined by hand using mercury, a toxic process. The United Nations estimates that over 70% of gold transactions in Venezuela occur outside the law. The winners are those who control the deposits, armed groups and corrupt officials. In Bolivar State, so-called sindicatos, paramilitary organizations, impose a tax on every gram of metal. Under their laws, 20% of all mined gold goes to them as security payment. The government turns a blind eye. These resources sustain the local economy when banks have run dry. Gold has become the currency of survival. In a country where gasoline once cost less than water, a loaf of bread is now measured in metal mined by children. Can a society survive when spoons filled with another's despair replace money? Venezuela, 2025. In the country with the world's largest oil reserves, hospitals remain without electricity. According to the National Federation of Medical Workers, more than 65% of public medical institutions experience regular power outages, lasting anywhere from 2 to 12 hours. In provincial hospitals, the situation is even worse. Most have no functioning generators. Since the massive blackout of 2019, the national power grid has never been fully restored. The reasons are clear: outdated equipment, lack of maintenance, and corruption in repair contracts. A Human Rights Watch study found that 70% of the country's power plants are operating beyond their intended lifespan, and over half of all transformers have gone more than a decade without preventive maintenance. Under such conditions, operating rooms become death traps. Doctors use their phones as flashlights to finish surgeries. In 2023, the Caracas Medical Association recorded over 200 deaths directly linked to sudden power cuts, from ventilator shutdowns to failed resuscitations. Private clinics survive thanks to imported diesel generators, but the cost of fuel and maintenance makes them inaccessible to most citizens. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Health continues to report a so-called stable system. When an operating room is lit by the flash of a smartphone, it is not a scene from a horror movie. It is the daily reality of a nation where light has become a privilege. In the center of Caracas, shops appear fully stocked, but only at first glance. On the shelves stand empty boxes of pasta, sugar, and milk. This is not marketing. It is a state showcase of stability. According to the Observatorio Venezolano de Finanzas, the shortage of basic goods in state-run retail networks exceeds 55%, and in some regions reaches up to 70%. After the government introduced price controls in 2014, most producers simply halted production. Selling below cost became impossible. Supermarkets turned into facades, packages filled with air, bottles of water labeled as cooking oil, cardboard mock-ups of products printed for display. State television cameras filmed these shelves to broadcast reports of full supply for the population. In reality, the economy operates through a parallel black market. Bloomberg reports that over 65% of all food is sold not through official stores, but through private intermediaries or street vendors. Prices there are 5 to 10 times higher than the government's fixed rates, and transactions are often made in US dollars or cryptocurrency. Empty supermarkets are not an accident, but a political strategy. The government projects control, while the true survival market functions outside its reach. A nation where shelves are lined with phantoms of goods is one living inside an information set piece. When reality is replaced by mock-ups, the question is no longer what people will eat tomorrow, but whether they can still trust their eyes today. Every day, hundreds of unaccompanied children cross the border bridges between Venezuela and Colombia. According to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, in 2024 alone, more than 40,000 minors crossed the border by themselves. They carry bags of food or medicine, or simply search for temporary work to return home and feed their families. The main crossings are the Simón Bolívar Bridge in San Cristobal and Tienditas in Táchira State. There operates an informal network of smugglers known as trocheros, who for $2 to $3 guide children through closed zones or bribed border posts. Many of these minors fall victim to human trafficking or end up recruited by armed groups active in the border region. Human Rights Watch reports that 1 in 6 Venezuelan children leaving the country either goes missing or is exploited. Colombia has officially received over 2.8 million Venezuelan migrants, including about 500,000 children. Yet most lack documentation, depriving them of the right to education and health care. Charitable organizations run temporary shelters, but resources are scarce. Each volunteer may face dozens of new arrivals daily. For the Venezuelan government, these children are labeled temporary travelers. For Colombia, they are invisible citizens without status. In truth, they represent a generation growing up between two nations, belonging to neither. Deep within the Venezuelan Amazon, in the states of Bolívar and Amazonas, lies one of the largest illegal gold mining zones in Latin America. According to the International Crisis Group, more than 250,000 people work there, most without legal status or protective equipment. The mines are controlled by armed groups known as sindicatos, hybrids of criminal gangs, former soldiers, and drug cartels. They impose their own taxes. 20 to 30% of all extracted gold is taken for their benefit. Workers toil in swampy pits, standing barefoot in water mixed with mercury, a metal used to separate gold despite its well-known toxicity. Human Rights Watch reports that mercury levels in residents' blood exceed the World Health Organization limit by a factor of 10. In the Caroni and Cucaima rivers, concentrations of heavy metals already surpass 0.5 milligrams per liter. classifying the situation as an environmental catastrophe. The government officially denies the scale of illegal mining, yet NASA satellite images have detected over 4,000 active sites in 2024 alone. Part of the gold is funneled through black market routes to Dubai, Turkey, and Russia, generating hundreds of millions of dollars. The profits flow to military structures guarding the Arco Minero territory, a project meant to be state-controlled, but now functioning as a legalized smuggling network. The Amazon is dying so that a bankrupt economy can survive. Mercury poisons the rivers, while the markets poison consciences. Despite economic collapse, shortages, and crumbling infrastructure, Venezuela still holds more than 150 officially registered carnivals every year. The most famous takes place in El Callao, Bolívar State, which in 2016 was even declared part of UNESCO's Intangible Cultural Heritage. But today, these celebrations unfold under starkly different circumstances. Parades march past abandoned factories, empty schools, and darkened homes. Organizers operate without state support. Budgets have been cut by 80% over the past decade. Costumes are stitched from recycled plastic, and drums are made from metal containers. Local authorities encourage these festivities because they project an image of normality for the media. While television cameras capture crowds in bright costumes, humanitarian stations nearby distribute UN-supplied baby food. According to cultural researchers at the Central University of Venezuela, over 1.5 million people take part in these events each year. For many, it is not merely entertainment. It is the only day they can earn a few dollars, selling drinks or souvenirs to tourists. At the same time, the government uses the carnivals as a propaganda tool. State broadcasters air them under the slogan, "Life goes on." The mechanism is simple: to manufacture the illusion of joy amid ruin. A country that has lost its industry, education, and healthcare still invests in fanfares and parades to avoid speaking of empty hospitals and empty plates. In the country with the largest oil reserves in the world, gasoline officially costs less than 1 US cent per liter. Yet in practice, it is almost impossible to buy. After the collapse of the state oil company PDVSA, crippled by sanctions, corruption, and decaying infrastructure, more than 80% of refineries are either shut down or running at minimal capacity. According to Bloomberg, in 2024, Venezuela produced only about 220,000 barrels of fuel per day, while domestic demand exceeded 500,000 barrels. The shortage has created a privileged access system. At state-run gas stations, fuel is sold at symbolic prices, but queues stretch for tens of kilometers, and in reality, fuel can only be obtained by bribing the soldiers guarding the pumps. On the black market, a liter costs between $1 and $3, up to 100 times the official price. In border regions, gasoline has become a form of currency, used to pay for food, medicine, and even children's schooling. Fuel smuggling into Colombia and Brazil has evolved into an entire shadow economy. According to Transparency International, illegal transporters, known as bachaqueros, move up to 40,000 barrels of gasoline daily, generating hundreds of millions of dollars in profit. The beneficiaries are military officers and officials who protect and profit from the trade. Today, Venezuelans stand in line for their own fuel, sold back to them by those who were meant to safeguard it. Once, Maracaibo, Cabimas, and Lagunitas were the symbols of Venezuela's oil miracle. Drilling towers lit the night sky, and workers' salaries exceeded those of much of Europe. Today, these cities resemble post-war ruins. According to official PDVSA data, oil production has fallen from 3.2 million barrels per day in 1998 to just 700,000 in 2024, the lowest level in 8 decades. When the wells ran dry and the equipment stopped, the company laid off tens of thousands of workers. Unemployment in Zulia State now exceeds 45%, and much of the population has left, More than 300,000 people have departed from the Maracaibo area alone. Streets that once hosted the offices of Shell and ExxonMobil are now lined with abandoned gas stations and rusting pumps. The remnants of infrastructure are being dismantled for scrap. Even pipelines are cut apart and sold for 20 cents a kilogram. Environmentalists report chronic leaks. In Lake Maracaibo, oil contamination exceeds permitted levels by 35 times, with slicks covering over 13,000 hectares of water surface. Meanwhile, the government continues to claim stabilization of the energy sector. Thus emerges the phenomenon of ghost cities, once prosperous towns that have lost both their industry and their future. Former oil drillers now sell fuel on the black market or pan for gold in the jungle. When the oil that once made a nation rich leaves behind only rust and unemployment, is it the end of an era or a warning to all who live off their resources? Venezuela's education system, once among the most advanced in Latin America, now stands on the brink of collapse. According to UNICEF, over 1.7 million children are not attending school, either due to lack of transportation or hunger. Public schools no longer provide regular meals. Since 2020, the National Feeding Program has been funded at only 20% of its required level. Teachers report that students faint during class, and in some regions more than 60% of children arrive at school without breakfast. The material infrastructure has also deteriorated. The Ministry of Education admits that over half of the country's schools lack running water or electricity. Chalk, notebooks, and textbooks have become scarce commodities. In the states of Barinas and Aragua, teachers use cardboard boxes as blackboards, and textbooks are copied by hand. A teacher's monthly salary is about $10 to $15, forcing thousands to leave the profession or emigrate. According to the teachers' union FENATEV, Venezuela has lost over 150,000 educators in the past 5 years, about one-third of the pre-crisis workforce. Many schools have turned into half-empty buildings, serving as humanitarian aid centers instead of classrooms. The government responds with campaigns promoting digital modernization of education, though 70% of students lack internet access. Education, once meant to be a path out of poverty, has become its hostage. How can a country raise its next generation when teachers have no chalk and children have no bread to make it to school? Venezuela holds the world record for beauty pageant victories: 7 Miss Universe, 6 Miss World, and 8 Miss International titles. A nation where the beauty industry once served as a national brand has now become its own paradox. In the 1990s and 2000s, the Miss Venezuela show drew 80% of the country's TV audience, with a budget exceeding $10 million. By 2024, that budget had fallen tenfold, and the stage that once represented the ideal Venezuela has turned into a platform for emigration. Most models no longer see pageantry as a path to fame, only as a ticket out of the country. According to the Cámara de la Moda Venezolana, over 60% of finalists from the past 5 years have emigrated to Mexico, Spain, or the United States, where they now work as TV hosts or cosmetologists. Some have ended up in illegal agencies that mask sexual exploitation under the guise of modeling. The industry survives thanks to private sponsors and cosmetic surgery clinics, which use pageants as advertising. Preparing for Miss Venezuela remains a business. A full transformation course costs between $20,000 and $50,000, while the average annual salary in the country is less than $400. This has created a system where appearance is social capital, and the body is an investment in exile. A country that once prided itself on having the most beautiful women in the world now exports them, just as it once exported oil. Can beauty still be a source of national pride when the only way to preserve it is to flee one's homeland?